Hey everyone, welcome to Pokemon Draft League 200. This is the first video that focuses on roster drafting. Basically, how do I know how to pick a group of 10 to 12 Pokemon that I can use for the rest of the season? As a disclaimer, this is done in the lens of Generation 9. I'm not the best Draft League player, but all the information and advice here is sourced from my own experience from last year's Draft League, as well as watching some more experienced players and channels and seeing what they do and why they do it. And finally, you should have a good understanding of competitive Pokemon and rules. It's not required, but it could be helpful when I talk more in a bit. Now, first, let's talk about what makes a good roster. And the truth is, I don't have a good answer for you. It is not fair to say a one-size-fits-all answer because everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. What I can say is that a good roster should set you up for success. And what that means is that it gives major threats to use and it leaves no major weaknesses. Now, you might be still thinking, Jeremy, I don't know what that means. And I might be able to talk more later about what that means. But again, this is up to you and your strengths. It could be helpful to talk about team archetypes. If you play competitive Pokemon, you might recognize some of these terms, but we're going to be talking about stall, hyper offense, and maybe everything in between. So let's start with hyper offense. Hyper offense is only concerned really with hitting your opponent hard. It's okay if the Pokemon goes down, but the idea is to trade pieces and eventually come up on top through breaking power. Now, what separates hyper offense from regular offense is that hyper offense teams usually start with a Pokemon who's meant to do something turn one, and then maybe something turn two, and then immediately die. And the idea is that hopefully those two turns are able to set up the rest of the team such that the 5v6 is still an even fight. So the example down here, we have a lot of heavy hitters. We have a Manaphy, we have Golden Go, we have Roaring Moon. But our lead is a Ribombee, whose main goal is to set up Sticky Web, maybe get a Stun Spore off, and then probably go down afterwards. So, hyper offense, trade down pieces for the rest of the Pokemon team to KO and break. On the other side of the spectrum, we have Stall. These Pokemon teams have little to none offensive firepower. They're great for players who are okay with leaving the battle halfway through, getting a bag of popcorn, coming back, and just kind of clicking the button that you've been using. It doesn't have a lot of attacking moves. You can see there's only Waterfall on this Donzozo. But the main point is that it relies on chip damage and winning the long term. So you can see there's a couple of Pokemon here that have the Regenerator ability, like Alola and Hydrapple. It has Gliscor with Poison Heal to be able to just keep its HP still high. It has a special wall in Blissey, an unaware wall in Dondozo. And there's a lot of high PP moves, and the idea is to have superior defenses, whittle down the offensive team, win slowly, have more PP than the other team. It really does not like sacking. Getting one of the Pokemon killed can often break down walls to other Pokemon getting killed. Finally, we have everything in between, known as balance. The main signifier of balance is that it just isn't all in on stall or hyper offense. It can have breakers, but the idea is not to stack any of them. So the first example we have here is semi-stall, where there is a bunch of defensive Pokemon, but there's also Meowscarada, who's running max speed and max attack, four moves, is a great attacker. On the other side, we have offense, which has a lot of hard hitters like King Gambit, Iron Valiant. There's also Slowking Galar that is running max HP, max special defense. It has Regenerator. And the main point of that team is to have a lot of pivoting moves to make sure no Pokemon actually can get killed for free. So there's Chilly Reception on Slowking. On Landers and Siduris, they probably have U-Turn. The final type of team I want to bring up is weather and terrain teams. The main idea here is that you get Pokemon that have abilities and effects from a field condition in order to get an edge on your opponent. The main example that we had of this last year was from Nathan Kim. He was able to get an Abomasnow with snow warning, which automatically sets up snow, raises the defense of ice types. Abomasnow is able to set up Aurora Veil, which cuts down the damage even further. Then, afterwards, he's able to send in a Subtitan with Slush Rush, which doubles its speed in hail. From there on, is able to use Belly Drum because it can set up whenever it wants when it has a screen active, and from there, it can clean up a game. So the question still remains, which team style is the best? And the answer is there's not a best team style. In Generation 9, both stall and hyper offense are both viable strategies for team building. If you want to hit hard and just focus on ending the game quickly, you might want to lean more offensively. If you're willing to wait out the long game and have the patience to let the game go on for a while, you can lean stall. What's important as a recommendation, especially for draft league, is that you try to aim for a balance. And by that, I mean, please don't set yourself up to lock yourself into one form of play. To explain why, I'm going to be explaining with food. So imagine that you are an excellent pizza maker. You are just a master of the craft. And in specific, you are really good at making a meat lover's pizza. You just love slapping the meat up there, putting it in the oven. It comes out perfect every single time. One day I go up to you and I say, okay, listen, for the next 8 weeks, I'm going to be sending some friends over, one a week. They all have their different preferences and stuff. And you have to choose 10 to 12 ingredients right now, and you have to make a pizza for them. So you say, okay, this is going to be great. I'm going to start with some dough, some cheese, some sauce, and I'm just going to get a lot of meat. I'm just going to stack up my fridge full of pepperoni and sausage. I'm going to have a couple of sauces too that help complement this pizza. It's going to be awesome. Well, maybe you do make a really good meat lover's pizza, but for every single week, I'm not confident that every single friend is going to be a fan of the meat lover's pizza. Some people might not eat meat. Some people might not even like this style of pizza. So a wiser decision would be to still have the main pizza ingredients. You can still have some meats too, because that's what you're good at. But you should also diversify and get some vegetables too. You have some peppers and onions. You can have some fresh mozzarella balls if you want to make a margarita pizza for those who don't like the typical style of pizza. And you can have some other sauces too. And the idea here is that now you don't have a meat lover's lineup of ingredients, but rather you have a lineup of ingredients that has the option to run a meat pizza as well as a vegetable pizza, a margarita pizza, a pizza with sauce. So the idea is that while you can't account for every single thing the friend might like that's coming over, you can still build in a way that allows you to have the best chance to have something prepared that your friend might like the best. Now, let's translate this analogy. The ingredients that you pick are the Pokemon. The friend that comes over every week is the battle that you have every week. And the pizza that you make is the team that you end up cooking, is the ingredients that you end up using for that actual week. What's important to note is that in this draft format, you have to account for 8 or more weeks of 10 to 12 Pokemon. Every roster is going to be different from the one before it. Every single roster can mean that different styles of teams may work better for one week than others. So if you pigeonhole yourself into just getting all 10 to 12 Pokemon of a single type, then the best matchup is going to be very matchup dependent. And no matter what 6 Pokemon you bring, you're going to be pretty predictable to your opponent, especially in the later section of our draft season. So the idea is to have a diverse enough roster that you can build a type of team what's necessary. You don't have a stall roster, but you have a roster that has the ability to run stall or semi-stall or balance. Now, To kind of operationalize this a little more, I have a checklist here from the YouTuber Tone. He's very helpful in giving advice in his videos on what makes a good roster. So I've broken it down into three main categories: typings, learn sets, and speed. You can pause it here right now if you want to get the broad overview, but we're going to be talking about these in the future videos. What's important to note here, though, every item on this checklist are just pointers. It's okay to not have one ground immunity. It's okay to not have just one stealth rocker. What's important to note is that if you maybe miss some of these, it's important to note what exactly does this bring to our roster? What weaknesses does this absent open up in my team? And you should have that in mind when you are team building for your actual opponent. Now, let's talk about resources. On the left-hand side, we have a Pokemon draft selection template where I just have every single role that was on the previous slide. And what you can do is that you can make a copy of it as we go through the roster selection process. You can, once you get a Pokemon, you can write down what roles they fill. So you can say, okay, I put it down as a Steel type in the Dragon Steel Fairy Core, and it also provides me one strong priority option. On the right-hand side, we have the general linked resources. These are going to be in the description of every 200 level video. They're going to have links to every single 200 level presentation and also external resources that I think are helpful. So it has the selection template that's on the left, and the one I want to bring your attention to is the one called Tone How to Draft. Again, Tone is the YouTuber that has a lot of advice on how to make a good roster, and what he has a video series on is where he starts with three Pokemon, they're pretty strong, and then he goes through his thought process of when he drafts, what should his fourth pick be that helps complement the top three? In round 5, what is another Pokemon that helps support the top 4? He keeps going on. So it's a little longer form content, but it's very informative. You can just like, play it as you walk to class or something, and I think it would be still effective. Finally, let's have a preview of the Pokemon Draft League 200 level topics. So for 201, these are going to be concerned with types and cores, specifically like what types do you want to get on your roster, but also what combination of types work really well with each other offensively and defensively. For the 202 level video, we're going to be talking about learn sets. What Pokemon moves do you want to have on your roster to make sure that you have a diverse enough styles of gameplay? For 203, we're going to be talking about speed tiers, specifically why it's good to have fast Pokemon, but why it's not good to have all fast Pokemon, why it's good to have kind of gaps in speed. And finally, 204 is going to cover everything else that wasn't in the other three videos. It's going to be talking about additional roles that you can think about. You can look at how to actually plan a roster. And finally, some nuances. Every single video is going to give nuances, but this one is just going to be what wasn't covered in the other videos. So that's everything I have for you in this video, and I will see you in the other videos.